Меня зовут Тоня Самсонова, я основатель и SEO и фаундер сервиса The Question, сервиса, который существует в России, и сейчас я занимаюсь британским офисом The Question. И нам кажется, что те медиа, которые мы строим в России, и те медиа, которые мы распространяем на весь мир, конкурентоспособны. Мы сегодня будем проводить вечерний The Question с главным редактором Buzzfeed Беном Смитом, который согласился ответить на наши вопросы, потому что он считает, как он сказал в переписке, что Россия является с точки зрения инноваций в медиа и подходах одной из самых интересных стран. И те технологии, которые мы используем, вне зависимости от языкового контекста, политического контекста или любого другого, вне зависимости от объема рекламного рынка, они глобальны, и в каком-то смысле мы во всех странах решаем одни и те же проблемы и сталкиваемся с одним и тем же сломом традиционной медийной модели и традиционной рекламной модели. И кто первый из нас догадается, каким образом и как вести бизнес-модель медиа дальше и рекламную модель, то это молодец, и я уверена, что все мы за этим прекрасным примером и моделью придуманной последуем. Сегодня мы будем задавать вопросы Бену Смиту, и каждый раз, когда у меня, как у журналиста, появлялась возможность кому-то действительно интересному не только мне, задать вопросы, провести с ним 40 минут, я понимала, что было бы слишком эгоистично, если бы все вопросы, которые я задавала, были моими личными. Именно поэтому мы договорились, что все вопросы, которые сегодня будут заданы, будут вашими вопросами, либо теми, которые были собраны на The Question при анонсе мероприятия, либо теми, которые вы можете прямо сейчас задать. Для того, чтобы это сделать, передо мной будет фид ваших вопросов, которые будут появляться у вас во время интервью. Я призываю вас ответственно относиться к 45 минутам, которые нам выделены. Поэтому, если вы видите, что ваш вопрос уже задан, просто полайкайте его, он тогда поднимется наверх, и я задам его в первую очередь. Заходите на thequestion.ru, там большой баннер «Вопросы Бену Смиту», главному редактору Buzzfeed. Регистрируйтесь, задавайте свой вопрос, я буду видеть обновление в режиме real-time. Вот так нет, вот так не вопрос, а когда thequestion.ru, тогда вопросы можно задать. Регистрируйтесь и задавайте. Сегодня мы будем говорить на три, собственно, самые большие темы. Первая часть, которая интересует медиавладельцев и медиаменеджеров, тех, кто занимается содержанием медиа, она касается управления редакционными командами и тем, какие цели может сегодня редактор ставить для редакционной команды или владелец медиа ставить для редакционной команды, для того, чтобы, с одной стороны, сохранять содержание, а с другой стороны, делать из медиа бизнес, что мало кому удается, и мы узнаем сегодня, удается ли это Buzzfeed в полном объеме. Вторая часть, которая меня интересует, это вложенные конфликты интересов в нативной рекламе и каким образом Buzzfeed обходит эти конфликты интересов. Третья большая история связана с тем, что для нас с вами Facebook стал одновременно и основным каналом привлечения аудитории, и конкурентом в рекламной индустрии. Это довольно уникальная история и довольно уникальная ситуация, с которой мы с вами пытаемся каким-то образом научиться сосуществовать, не будучи при этом суперзависимыми от них и имея возможность на то, чтобы наш бизнес существовал отдельно. И я надеюсь, что вопросы, которые у нас накопились, займут 20 минут. Всего у нас есть 40 минут времени, и после этого я буду задавать ваши вопросы. Если вам во время нашего разговора очень захочется, чтобы именно ваш вопрос прозвучал, пожалуйста, поднимайте руку. Я надеюсь, что и этот формат возможен, но в первую очередь я буду задавать вопросы, которые уже опубликованы, потому что это позволит нам сохранить темп и ускорить, и получить, собственно, больше ответов. И я думаю, что в этом смысле ровно в этом и заключается наша цель. Мы ждем момента, когда Бен Смит подключится к нам из радостного Нью-Йорка. Я думаю, что он готовился. Интересно то, что происходит в Америке после выборов Трампа. Безусловно, Бен Смит с его политическим прошлым в политической журналистике и, в общем-то, в такой серьезной журналистике работал весь этот год во время избирательной кампании. И, конечно, ему приходилось решать вопрос о том, насколько Buzzfeed станет партийным медиа и включится ли он в общую кампанию «Спасем Америку», или он будет сохранять нейтралитет. А если сохранять нейтралитет, то каким образом это возможно? Да. Да? Hi, Ben. Hello.
Hi, добрый вечер. Good to see you all.
Good to see you too. Oh, we have some sound.
I heard you say that to talk about Donald Trump.
Exactly, and yes, because I think that that could be our first question. And the question is, like, I saw you wrote an email to your political team, to your news team, regarding the coverage of the American elections. But the first question would probably be, imagine yourself on a time machine traveling backwards a year, and you have like 10 minutes to tell yourself, 5 minutes to give yourself a worthy advice, knowing that Donald Trump will eventually win. What would you tell yourself? You have like 5 minutes to address Ben Smith.
I'm not sure I wouldn't believe myself if I went back in time and told myself that Donald Trump was going to win. I mean, there has been a lot of talk here about the extent to which there was a media failure. And I'm not sure, I actually think that a lot of journalists at Buzzfeed, at the Washington Post, at the New York Times, did a really good job, but that there was a sense in which Trump kind of hacked the media, figured out a way around traditional media. He also I think a lot of us here see television as a dying medium, and television no longer has the kind of, I don't know, Trump was able to really push television around, to make demands of television, that he would ask that they point their cameras in certain directions and not others. He would kind of yell at them. He would use the fact that he could bring ratings for access. And he really, I think, took advantage early in the campaign of the weakness of the television media to really dominate it. And then as the campaign went on, I think was able to, or his supporters, some of his supporters in Moscow, were able to use the social media very, very effectively.
But obviously you've benefited from Donald Trump popularity, because if you have like two options, either to publish something about Donald Trump or not, and if your KPI is audience on the website, you would have a very huge incentive to publish a story about Donald Trump.
I mean, he was a big story, but I think that, and I think the stories that were published about him were mostly pretty accurate and pretty straightforward and often very negative. But the thing that he did was he just went on television and talked, and the television networks just in a way, they syndicated the Donald Trump show and allowed him to take over the platform rather than cover him.
Well, then enough for the politics, and the whole audience here are those who are, those who are thinking about the business models and the KPIs and the right KPIs that will hold the editorial process and keep the quality and the quantity in the right balance. So probably the next question would be is how you make sure, if you put KPIs in audience to your editors, that the content is good. And should you, via managing news team or editorial team, establish KPIs that are related to the audience and to the traffic each publication attracts? How you balance that?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is like a great question, and sort of in some ways I think the central question for people who are trying to run serious news organizations that are also really native to this ecosystem where we have so much, where we can't ignore the feedback that we're getting from our audience. I think one thing that we at BuzzFeed, think about a lot is that there's always the quest for like one metric, one KPI, one number that will tell you exactly what to do, and and you'll never find that, and that's a trap. If you think that it is unique visitors, if you think that it's page views, you will create lots of little page breaks between pages and slideshows so that people can click 1,000 times. But that's a terrible user experience. If it becomes time on site, you have sites that are kind of trapping people on the site with pop-ups and with other features that again aren't actually what the user wants. I think we think a lot about both we think a lot about what our audience actually wants, what a piece of content is actually doing for the audience. And our editors, I think, face pressure both from the fact that they see all this data. We're all swimming in the data. Every page of the site, if you are logged in, shows you the data. But at the same time, they face pressure to get scoops and break news and blow up Twitter, which isn't necessarily where you have traffic, but there's, but where you're kind of the thing that good journalists sort of know, that you want to be driving the conversation.
But do your journalists know how much traffic they attracted and how they performed and their investigative reporting performed against the others? Do they have to commit to a certain audience?
They always know, but I think, and every page they see all the traffic, and I think that's really important for every story, including the most serious investigations and like the silliest coverage of animals. But also, I think an investigative reporter knows that if he can reach 1 million people, that's a huge number for a big investigation on something that may not be of absolutely general interest and that is 4,000 words long. Whereas a reporter who has like an amazing fun story that comes out of social media knows that 1 million is like pretty good, but not the best. And I think it's important both that you understand the audience well enough to know what's a success in different contexts.
Well, just to remind those who just switched on and watching us on the video screens at tvrain.ru, where you can watch this conversation. This is Ben Smith, the editor-in-chief of the Buzzfeed, and I'm Tonya Samsonova. I'm CEO of The Question, the much, much smaller project compared to Buzzfeed. By the way, are you profitable?
I'm actually not that's not my side of the house, and I think I'm not supposed to talk about it.
But what's your feeling? Do you know it at least?
My feeling? I think it is not so much like a feeling as a fact.
Okay.
So I should leave that to my my colleagues on our business side.
But well, are you in a position to know the performance of the company, or editors shouldn't know that because their job is content?
I think most writers and editors probably shouldn't know, but yes, I am.
So you know.
No, just not telling you.
Okay. Sorry. Okay. Well, regarding the native advertising, there is another problem that could occur with the Buzzfeed model, and the problem is that if I am the company and I have two options, either to reach a journalist and agree to give him an interview, and then by that agree to answer, well, not very good and good questions towards my company, or I have another option to produce native advertising instead and get the coverage I need. I would always choose the less risky one. Isn't the whole model of native advertising ruining the publications about the company and the investigations about the company's business? Because companies nowadays don't have any incentive to talk directly to the journalists.
Right. I think the answer to that is basically no, but there is one exception. I think, native advertising is not new. The idea that advertising could be native to a platform. Television advertising is a form of native advertising. Advertising in magazines, in fashion magazines in particular, has also always been kind of fully native. I think that there's always been a challenge of that political figures can go around the media. I think the threat now is not native advertising; it's social media. It's the fact that Donald Trump or Vladimir Putin can speak to you directly out of your phone and avoid any questions that they don't like. And I think in most industries, in most in politics, places where people want credibility, where they want to be trusted, they I think at times force themselves to talk to journalists even if they don't want to, and realize that they have to. And we haven't really, I have not experienced that we compete with ourselves, that somebody says, like, we would like, we're not going to give you an interview, we're going to buy a list, we're going to buy a fun list of great reasons we're great. I think, they do both, they do neither. They make those decisions separately. I think the industry where this stuff is trickiest is actually the entertainment industry. It's where credibility isn't so much the goal as entertainment, and that's a place where, this isn't really specifically for us, but for the whole Hollywood media, they're always navigating this question of like, well, should we buy an ad and access? And so I think that's actually where this question comes up the most, is in Hollywood, and not really specifically for us, but for the whole media.
BuzzFeed recently made a lot of very successful experiments with the video format. Some of them become your commercial revenue stream, some of them become just purely very engaging format. But I was always wondering whether we try to produce videos because just like people love gadgets and that's a very easy way to consume the content, or there are actually some stories that benefit because they're told not in written text but in the video. Because unlike our interview, which I would rather read as a text because I want to understand every word that you say and like really think about what you're saying. We are doing it in the video, yeah. But well, are there any stories and good examples where video is better than text?
Sure, I think this is a bit of a false choice. Like there are a lot. I mean, I would say the basic axis is that the more there is humor, emotion, or just something visually compelling, the more video is the medium that is right. The more it's pure information. Like video, I think, is not a great way to cover the stock market and the currency market, right? It's not a great way to, it's actually often not a particularly good way to cover politics, where it's really just people talking, information being exchanged. But obviously, I mean, I think the rise of live video has been really interesting lately, and I think one of the really compelling things at times is when you want to see what it is like to be somewhere. These big protests in the United States lately have given that feeling of like, millions of people are watching those on our Facebook streams and others because people want to know what it's like to be there. And I think, interviews with victims of some crime, television is a successful medium because people have always consumed video.
Well, I think it's a right time to give people who are sitting here an opportunity to ask you questions. I'm a bit like promoting my platform because I asked everybody to post the questions on thequestion.ru, and you can do that if you go to the website. Meanwhile, we have a lot of questions, and I think one of the really interesting one, aren't you afraid of Facebook? Aren't you afraid that BuzzFeed would be too much dependent on the sole platform, which actually don't belong to you, and anything can happen?
I think that this is a moment, I think that was maybe truer a year or two ago than it is now. I think this is a moment, I don't actually know really how this played out in the Soviet Union, but in the US in the 80s, there was the rise of all of these cable, the cable, these cable channels were built out, and then there were all these competing media companies on the cable networks. And then cable starts competing with with mobile, with broadcast. It's actually, I think it's a very competitive landscape right now, and one in which media companies maybe have a little more power than we did a couple of years ago, because Facebook is obviously huge. Snapchat is huge. Amazon, Netflix are huge. Twitter is very important in the news space. There are other, YouTube remains a massive platform, and these platforms increasingly realize that they are competing against one another and also competing against television, and that the winner will be the one who has the best content. And so I think you see something happening now that I think nobody would have thought a few years ago, which is Facebook paying media companies or working out production deals with media companies because they see themselves competing with other outlets for great content, and we're eager to work with all of them. We produced on election night, for instance, we did a live broadcast on Twitter that was very successful.
If you put on the scales in America, on one part of the scales you would put Facebook, Google, and Twitter, and Snapchat, and social media basically, and Google, and on the other, all the major newspapers, publications, established media, who do a lot of political coverage and research. Who is heavier? Which institution is most important?
Oh, I guess I'm not sure you can put them on the scales, but I do think that when we think about media coverage, we think about looking at what is happening in Silicon Valley and how it is affecting the media companies in New York, and that I think you often make the mistake of looking at the newspapers or looking at television and saying, why are they making these decisions, without realizing that some decision was made in Silicon Valley that they are reacting to. Now, I agree that the most important decisions in some ways are being made in Silicon Valley. That then that's the water in which all these media companies are swimming.
Well, as we know, so getting back to the questions from our audience, as we know, you speak Russian a little bit. Which media in Russian you read sometimes? Not on a daily basis, but which media you know? Tell us the names.
I'm a fan of Medusa.
Wow.
I guess like that's a lot of that. That's one of the things I read in Russian. I should tell you that I read The Question, right?
You should.
I don't know. My Russian.
You have to.
My Russian is terrible, and so when I come to a Russian-speaking place, I have family in Latvia, so I go there sometimes. I pick up like the worst tabloid because the language is simpler. I think it's called Din. I don't know. So I just whatever is like the simplest language.
So
Reklama.
Medusa, Din, and The Question. Thank you. Okay, then.
But I would like to put in the plug for Medusa. I think they do great work.
Have you ever spotted the coverage of Russia Today, probably, or something like that?
Oh, of course.
What do you think?
Yes, lots. Hard to miss.
What do you think about that? I mean, are they doing a great job? Because in the UK, they're doing a great job, and they're quite like their ideas are spreading a lot. Are they spreading the same way in the United States?
I mean, I think they're doing a good job of undermining Americans' trust in media. That seems like that's their goal. They, I think that they're a propaganda outlet and a kind of a new kind, and in some ways a new kind of animal, in the sense that they're a state-sponsored propaganda outlet that for whom accurate reporting is occasionally a tool, but only when it's useful.
What's the best way to produce a viral content on social media? The next question from Xenia Green. Could you give us a recipe or some life hacks?
Part of the problem is that listening to your audience is so important. Actually, getting obsessed with by which I mean the numbers,
Boring.
seeing what works, trying to figure out what worked, and then and very rigorously looking at that. I think if you are probably most viral stuff now is this food channel we have, Tasty, and if you look at that, it's this very like simple, pure concepts. It's very like there's no voice, there's no person. It's just they really sort of isolated the exact thing that people want to share, and it is only that. And it was a very sort of rigorous process of trial and error that got us there. The challenge, though, I think, is that the other thing that makes things viral is novelty. And as soon as you think you've figured out the secret and you start doing it again and again, people get bored.
Yeah, this is Ben Smit, the editor-in-chief of Buzzfeed.com, and we're proceeding with your questions. And the next one, tell us about the crisis that Buzzfeed as a company had and how you overcome them. What were the most severe crises you had as a company?
That's a good question. I mean, I feel like in the
Not
news
mine.
business, it's a crisis every day. So, so I guess it's a little hard for me to pull one out. I don't know. I still think of us as a startup, and so in some sense, like there's no sense that you just go to work and operate like any other day. We always feel like we're kind of going into battle. But I don't have if you want to ask me about a specific crisis, I can answer, but I can't. I don't know. I think crises are what you think they are.
Specific crisis, the one with which you were emotionally most involved in.
I think often the one I was emotionally most involved in. I mean, as an editor, I mean, this is a small thing in some ways, but when you have a writer who plagiarizes, like that's and you have to go through and go back and check all the work. There's like a feeling of, I think it's sort of very personal in a way, and that was something we had to deal with at one point.
Well then,
I mean, I'm more serious. I think on a more serious note, we had a reporter detained by separatists in eastern Ukraine for a few hours, which was a real crisis, though thankfully a short one.
Well, the next question probably would be, which critics from the outside were towards Buzzfeed you think is reasonable? The one that you think, you think of yourself that this is this has a point.
I think John Herman in the New York Times, who used to work for me, he in a way I think he looks at technology, and particularly the technology of media, and always sees the darkest possible future. And I think we often look at the same things and see the most optimistic possible future and invest in that. But I think he's often a really good check on the sort of techno-utopianism that comes out of Silicon Valley. I think he writes for the New York Times Magazine now.
Which values Buzzfeed brings to the society?
I think we do certainly sort of represent, I think, a kind of global conversation, a global internet conversation among young people around the world who I think feel themselves pretty globally connected. And also for whom I think there's a set of values around, I guess, autonomy and human rights, whether it's feminism or gay rights, that feel obvious and basic.
Is this kind of propaganda you incorporate into the real viral content? So you have like 10 kittens and the 11th item would be about gay rights, and then you feel good by the end of the day that you did something good for the society.
No, we never do that. In fact, we there was a terrible American cookbook written by Jerry Seinfeld's wife, in which it was about explaining how to get your children to eat vegetables. And it had all these recipes for like baking like spinach into cakes and things. That we never do. That is very much not our approach to content. We think our audience is smart. We never try to sneak things in.
Could you describe Buzzfeed in 2 words? This is the question from Anna Rubtsova. 2 words about Buzzfeed.
I can't do it. Sorry.
10 words. Okay.
I mean, I think.
What is your biggest?
If you want a serious answer to that question, because I think we are actually like a complicated thing, and we struggle to describe ourselves in 3 words. I think we are, but as a company, and I know that a lot of your audience is in the media business, we're a news organization, we're an entertainment company, and we're an advertising agency, and those are 3 different business units of Buzzfeed, and that's how we're organized.
There's a question from Gene Oley, and he asks, how do you do fact-checking at Buzzfeed? What are the tools that Buzzfeed uses to find news sources and stories, and do you use any cool tools made not in-house? So 3 questions. Fact-checking, tools to find news sources and news stories, and like third-party tools that you use.
Yeah, I think in the U.S. newspaper tradition, which is what I come out of, like reporters are basically responsible for getting their facts right, and that's for most of the stories that are moving pretty fast through the day, there's not a formal fact-checking process. Although Twitter is an incredible machine for fact-checking, and if you get something wrong, people will very politely point that out to you very fast. And it's very important to be transparent and correct when you do get things wrong. In terms of sorry, what was the second question? Like reporting.
Where do you find your stories? Where do we find our stories? I mean, a mix. We have beat reporters who are talking to sources in technology and politics and government, and getting information and trying to track it down, report it. We also obviously live on the internet and see things, and we have readers sending us things like the dress. Somebody found this weird dress that sometimes looked white and gold and sometimes blue and black, and the original poster messaged it to the woman running our Tumblr. And so and I think one of the things that we try to do is there's so much bullshit on the internet all the time and crazy stories, and you can't win the race to be the first to publish it. Like the only way to win the race for speed is to not care at all about the truth. Someone else will win that. But I think we feel like we're very good at tracking down the original person on Facebook who made the comment and asking them what they meant, and being the first to really report out a story that's going viral. And I think the audience, both loves the story if it is true, but also appreciates it if you're telling them if it's false, and that's a really kind of a growing part of our journalism, at least, is debunking things. Are you personally in charge of the audience numbers? Are there any KPIs set against you as an editor-in-chief?
Sure. Yes, definitely. I mean, there are goals for the traffic to news, although I think as we, right now it's this sort of moment of transition between thinking of ourselves as a website and really thinking of ourselves as a distributed news organization, and understanding what ought the goals to be for an election night Twitter live stream. We've never done it before. So we loved, the numbers were really big and we were happy about that, but we didn't necessarily go in knowing, we weren't, it's hard to be very precise about your goals as you're learning about the scale of these platforms. I think the, Facebook, but a lot of our views now are video views, right? On Facebook, on YouTube, on other platforms. Web traffic obviously is also very important. Traffic to platforms where we own and operate them, we get all the data, we sell the advertising is also really, is in some ways very important too.
Buzzfeed as a company, you have to perform a monthly growth of the audience, or you have like a minimum level, and then you can do, if you reach it, you can do whatever you want?
It's less rigid, honestly. And I think we also, I don't know if you've seen our logo, but it's like this arrow that goes like this. Sorry, I didn't do that on the screen, like this. And I think we understand that that is how things grow. It's not linear.
So what will happen to a writer who works for you for a year? You think that his job is amazing, but unfortunately, not a lot of people, except you and himself, read it. Will you fire him, or will you keep him because he's doing a great job as a journalist?
I don't really care if I like the stories so much, but if he is if the stories are doing things in the world, if they are getting people fired, if they are, causing companies to make changes in how they're doing business, changing government policy. If they're, as a reporter, you know how that is. There are two ways a story can succeed. It can reach lots and lots of people, or it can hit, and it can cause things to happen. And I think that's the other metric. I'm not interested in things that are this is a beautiful story that, this is a beautiful story that is interesting to me that nobody else reads and that doesn't matter in the world. That's not something I want to do.
If you could share some practical insights, I think this would be very, very good for all of us. But what would you advise to a person or to an editorial team who actually produce a very good content, but they don't know how to distribute it, especially on Facebook? Probably have some insights about how Facebook algorithms work or what's the best strategy. So imagine a team of 5 authors who started to create amazing content, and their survival depends on how fast they would reach their audience. What should they do?
Yeah, I think that is a tough question, because the most obvious thing to do is there's a very extreme pressure on Facebook that you see toward giving people exactly what they want to hear, whether it's true or false, And I think in American politics this year, you saw people sharing, there was a story that Hillary Clinton had been arrested that was very, very widely shared, and that there's a turn toward this just telling people what they want to hear, even if it's not true. I would say don't do that. And I think in a way it's less about, sometimes, if you are doing stories that people are really passionate about and telling them in a language that is very plain and direct, that is, in some sense, that's the core of it. There are technical questions. It's important to have a good thumbnail. I do think Facebook is favoring video in some ways right now, and that if you can find a way to tell those stories in a video form, and video may mean text, by the way. A lot of the video on Facebook has an element that is text. That's also a good, and can be pretty simple to make. That's I think something that's pretty important right now.
As now we're thinking that we're living in a disruption time for the media, and we see that the previous media models and business models didn't work. Could you enlist all the business models that you think are actually working in the media now? So what are the business models you can distinguish one from another for the media,
Right. I think, right, it is this moment of crazy change. And right now, most of the money, most of the advertising dollars are still on broadcast and on print, even as the eyeballs move over to our platforms. And it's sort of a strange moment, right, where television has so much money, even as their audiences are declining. They've also built these massive costs. It costs so much to put on an hour of television, and it's hard to imagine them or anyone being able to sustain that in a world where the cost structures are changing so fast. In the long term, and I think, those of us, I don't know if you were in the newspaper business, but if you were, you remember how fast things collapsed in the newspaper industry. It was an incredible business for a long time, and then all of a sudden, the floor fell out and it's still fallen. So I think ultimately the business model is going to be where the audience is, and I think and the challenge, and it's nice to not have the legacy. I think there's a huge advantage in being new and in not having the cost structure of the old business as you try to move to where the audience is and move ahead of advertising. I mean, I think, for us, what's working, native advertising, and, we have a huge internet advertising business, and it's very successful, and that's the biggest part of our business. We're also increasingly, I think, in the tradition of media companies, doing deals with platforms for shows. And so whether that's election night on Twitter or whether it's a series of entertainment shows we've produced for platforms and there are a lot of new platforms like YouTube Red and Verizon. That's a good business. We do some commerce that's pretty successful. You should buy the Tasty Cookbook. We
will. Which question about Russia you have that intrigues you? What would be if you were talking with President Putin, what would you ask him?
I mean, I think I would really love to understand how the information operations work. Who does he call and talk to about propaganda in the Italian election right now to support Beppe Grillo? Just operationally, how does that work is a question that I have. Do you know? Can you ask him for me?
It's a good one. Well, and what you don't understand about media business in the United States, what intrigues you? What's the question you go to sleep with?
That's, a lot, so much. I think the question of how news organizations are going to deal with political figures and public figures who can increasingly broadcast straight out of people's phones and talk to them directly is a question, though it is also true that every president is elected at a moment of strength and they think that they don't need the media. And George Bush said this and Obama said this, we can go straight to the people. And that works as long as you are popular. It works as long as you're winning. And then when you lose control of this, at some point inevitably you sort of lose control of the story and you find that you can't go around the media anymore and that, people don't trust you anymore. And that they need a level of authority that comes from the press. But I do think that the relationship between the sort of traditional media and this and powerful figures' use of social media is a huge open question. And I also think, how. I think there's a lot of things. I think it's obviously a moment of kind of consolidation in the media business here. Smaller. It's increasingly hard to be small. So I think that there'll be interesting changes there over the next couple of years. And then I guess, the competition between the platforms, is really fascinating. I think what Snapchat is doing with news is really interesting to watch. I think Apple News has become a real force also. A lot of people get their news there all of a sudden.
Well, Maria Davlechina asks you, are you planning to do Buzzfeed, to open a Buzzfeed office in Russia?
Russia is a hard place to be in the media business, I'm told.
Tell us more.
I mean, we would love to. Russia, it's an incredible news environment, and it has such a kind of amazing journalistic tradition. There are so many great Russian journalists who've done work under conditions harder than I can imagine. There's also just such a great Russian internet culture. I mean, the whole world of dash cams is you could spend your whole life on. We do publish sometimes in Russian. I think we have a page on Kontakte, and have a great guy in Moscow who both helps cover Russia for us, but also puts a fair amount of our content into Russian. It is just right. I think it's like there's I guess a reason that Medusa moved to Latvia. Those guys moved to Latvia. I think it's a tough place to cover the news and also be in business.
Thank you so much. This was Ben Smit, the editor-in-chief of Buzzfeed.com, and he was answering mine and yours question during the question evening night show, Friday night show. Is it Friday? No, it's Wednesday. It's Wednesday today.
No,
it's Wednesday.
Friday, yeah.
Okay.
It's Wednesday, and it feels like Friday. But thanks for having me, Tonya. If you guys have any ideas for what we ought to be doing in Russia, please let me know. Email is just Ben at BuzzFeed.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to ask you questions and to hear your answers here today. Thank you so much. Thanks.
Yes.
Bye.
See you in Moscow. Take care.
Большое спасибо за ваши вопросы. Это было очень интересно, и я чувствую, что мне повезло. И классно задавать вопросы Бену Смиту. И я надеюсь, что вам было интересно тоже. И мне показалось странным, что в Америке, где конкуренция между медиа невероятная, и по-настоящему трудно делать медиабизнес, и в России, где конкуренция ниже, но тем не менее сложнее условия, и ты не знаешь, что, собственно, лучше, быть одним воином в чистом поле или попытаться посражаться в медиа с такими людьми, как Бен Смит, что сложнее и какая задача менее выполнимая и более амбициозная. И вот чудно, что он говорит: слушайте, я бы в России не стал, и мне бы было тяжело, мне здесь проще. И в этом, мне кажется, в этом не то чтобы надежда какая-то есть, а просто из-за того, что мы, и многие из вас, я думаю, видели ваших коллег в разных странах, мы пытались, как The Question, мы много нанимали британских журналистов и британских редакторов или тех людей, которые занимаются дистрибуцией контента или продажами в медиаиндустрии. Мне было очень отрадно, что поскольку мы все пользуемся одними и теми же технологиями, наш глобальный уровень, я думаю, что там уровень людей, которые собрались в этом зале, он круче. В этом смысле мы не провинция. И для меня это классно. Мне классно работать с людьми, которые готовы конкурировать на глобальных рынках. И в этом смысле я думаю, что то, что мы занимаемся медиа-менеджментом и делаем медиа в России в этом году, в 2016-2017, когда, в общем, это делают либо суперпрофессионалы, либо отчаянные идиоты, мы все правильно делаем. Большое спасибо. Мне здесь очень классно, потому что я чувствую себя среди похожих людей, слабоумие, отвага. Спасибо.